Welcome to another episode of Confident AF Live. Today, we're going to talk about reaping and sowing inside of your business, which also applies to your personal life too. And y'all, I have to humbly come to you to deliver this message today because the reason why I'm sharing this is because I had to learn one of the hardest lessons about reaping and sowing. Like, it was such a hard lesson for me to learn. And I'm so grateful that I learned it. And I'm going to take this pruning that God has given me and I am going to share it with you because it's so important to share with all of you because I don't want you to experience what I went. And if you do it, I want to know you're okay and you're loved and it's all right. And I'm also going to share this story of how I found out about this taking this idea of reaping and sowing and all that kind of a thing and how it applies to your business because it's really important. And what do I still want to say? I guess there's no other way but to get into it. So the idea of reaping and sowing, comes from the idea of like when you plant a seed, you harvest the result of it. So one of the things that you must understand is that whatever you give and you put out to the world, it's what comes back to you. So when you give love, love comes back to you. It's not always, doesn't always come from the person that you're giving the love to, but it comes back. It's like money loves to circulate. When you give your money, it comes back in more quantities because that's a sign of abundance and you're helping out to the world. So, but what people forget, and people call this everyday karma, right? Is what people call this every day. The Bible says, be careful, you reap what you sow. There's also the verse that says, if you're faith-based, like those who live by the sword, die by the sword. I have thought about this in terms of today's business because I read someplace, I don't remember where it was, but they said that today's battles are fought in courtrooms and over litigation. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense because people who are like always suing somebody or always sending cease and desist letters are probably the same ones who are always getting and receiving cease and desist letters who are in courtroom battles too. You know what I mean? So like that was interesting to me to hear that too. But it's this idea that what you give and the energy that you put out comes back to you. And so, oh man. So let me first explain how this was like brought to my attention, which was I was reading a book by Joyce Myers. I don't remember which one it is. I know you're going to ask me, but she's written a bunch of books and I've read a bunch of them. But she mentions a story where when she was pregnant, a lot of people were judging her for like not showing up in ministry and not showing up to Bible study and like not being like active in the church, like with the faith-based group. And that it was revealed to her that early on, before she was pregnant, she had like this little Bible study, and her and the other women in the Bible study had judged a pregnant woman who stopped showing up to Bible study when she was pregnant, and how now the same thing was happening to her. She was reaping what she had sown. So, I had a similar experience where I try to think about the best way to share this. So basically, what happened is without knowing it, I had a conversation with somebody, and in that conversation, I had judged somebody else for overcommitting. I had judged somebody else for overcommitting inside of their business, and like pretty harshly too. Like really judge this person for overcommitting in the business. Yeah, that person's not honoring their agreements to their clients. They're not honoring their commitments. They're not delivering what they said, blah, blah, blah. Like really judge that person pretty harshly. And then what happened is that later, like a month later, I had someone come to me, a client actually, who basically fired me. And they fired me because I was overcommitted. and I wasn't delivering things on the timeline that I had agreed I would deliver things on. And they were right. I had overcommitted. I wasn't delivering on the timeline. I mean, I'm still delivering, just not on the timeline. And I still fully intended to honor all the commitments, all the agreements. And just I had a lot going on, and I didn't realize I'd overcommitted at the time. If I known I'd overcommitted at the time, I wouldn't have overcommitted, right? I don't think anybody goes into and is like, yes, I can't wait to set up. Like, it's not like I was like, I can't wait to set up this client for failure. I can't wait to not deliver on my promise. I can't wait to not do what I said I was going to do. That's just not me. It's not who I am. I was doing a lot of new things that I had never done before. And I grossly underestimated how long it would take me to do those things and where I was to deliver what I said I was going to deliver. Lesson learned in a really big way. The point is that I overcommitted to this client, and a month earlier I had a conversation where I talked about this other person and them overcommitting inside of their business, and it came right back at me. And then I got basically I got fired from the client, which is typical. Like, nobody wants to be fired from the client. I can't believe I'm admitting this on a podcast, because I love what I do so much. I care so much about what I do, and I always strive to do my very, 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 very best. And one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn this last year is that you can do your best and make a mistake. There will be some kind of consequence. God will protect you in that consequence, and love and grace and all the things. And like, it doesn't mean you did bad. Like, that's the weird piece. It's like, I felt so bad. Like, I was a horrible coach because I wasn't able to deliver on the timeline that I committed to. And it's like, God's like, no, you're amazing. You're amazing at what you do. You're amazing. You're doing everything the best that you can. And you had to learn this really valuable lesson now, because I can't take you where I want to take you if you didn't learn this valuable lesson now. And I've had a couple of times like that in my business this last year, where it's like, did I do my best? Yes. Okay, so I should be really happy, and there's not a whole lot to improve. And God's like, no, you have to improve this, this, this. And it's like, but God, like, you just said I'm doing a really good job. And God's like, you are doing a good job. And you have room to grow because you want to go over here. I'm excited to take you over there. But if you're going to go over there, then you got to grow in all these areas before I actually take you over there, because you're not ready to go over there yet. And I'm not sending you for failure until you grow in all these areas. So part of that was me having to learn this lesson of not judging. And by the way, last week's episode was on judgment and jealousy. And so if you haven't listened to that, go and listen to that. It's such a good podcast episode. I don't believe there's ever a human being on the face of planet Earth who has not experienced jealousy or judgment of other people. And in fact, I feel like that's the number one virus that's inside of the faith-based community or organized religion, is judgment. And the reason is because, like, I'm sure like people are judging themselves internally all the live long day of like, am I a good faith-based person? Am I a good Christian? Am I living up to these expectations? They know they're not, because none of us are perfect. And so because they know they're not, they judge other people because they've already judged themselves and they want to feel better. So it's just, that's because people always say like there's more judgment in the church than there's any place else. Well, it's because they're aware of who they want to be and they keep falling short. Instead of accepting grace and forgiveness and realizing that it's okay and that they're getting better and focused on their own journey, they want to make themselves feel better. So then they judge other people. But now we've kind of digressed. But apparently y'all needed to hear that in this episode today. So, yeah. So what I would say about reaping and sowing is that whenever you experience something that's very uncomfortable and weird inside of your business, it's not always going to be this too. I want to be really clear about that. If something weird or bad, malicious, something that's just like not cool happens inside of your business or your life, it is not always because you're reaping and sowing. I want to be really clear about that. It's not always because of that. And it is really helpful to ask and be like, was there a time when I did this to somebody else? Was there a time when I wasn't honest? Was there a time when I drug my feet? Was there a time when I didn't honor my commitment or my agreement? Was there a time when I lost my temper at somebody? Was there a time when I did something similar? And it is really helpful to realize that and reflect, because number one, it'll allow you to be a lot better of a human being. It will really allow you to be a better leader if you're leading a team, because when your team makes mistakes, like I have found that the universe, God, is like really quick to show me when I made a similar mistake so that I give grace to people and I forgive people. Now I have a boundary, and I learned this from a high coaching mastermind, and they articulated this so good, my friends at Clients and Community, which is be okay with mistake. Don't be okay with the same mistake twice because they didn't learn their lesson. And don't be okay if someone hides a mistake, because if you hide a mistake, there's no way to fix it. And if you hide something, it can grow and become a lot worse. Think about like a leaking pipe. I talk about this in my book, which if you haven't ordered it yet, you need to order my book, Confident AF, Unleash Your Inner Badass. So number one, ask, like, is there something that I did where I'm actually reaping what I sowed? And two, if you did do something, let's not make it a big deal, because the only reason why it's happening to you is so you learn the lesson and you don't repeat it. And if your faith-based, this means repentance and asking for forgiveness, which by the way, you've already been forgiven and just receiving it. If you're not faith-based, then I would just say, like, forgive yourself, forgive the idea, forgive the situation, and own up that like you shouldn't have done that, and decide to be a better person, decide not to do it again, decide to learn from it and grow from it and move on from it. And don't carry that with you. And it's okay. It's okay, because we've all done it. We all are guilty of it. And beating yourself up is just not a helpful thing to do. So that's what I had to do in this situation. Had to own it, had to own the fact that I had probably lost the client for a while. I had to forgive it. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive the situation. I had to forgive the judgments. I had to forgive all the ideas that came up from it. Yeah, like it just happens. Okay, now here's the good piece about sowing and reaping, which is you can also sow and reap good. So one of the things that my husband has said a lot to me is like, I can't believe that you did that for that person. I can't believe you did XYZ. And I'm like, well, I did XYZ because it was in my heart and I wasn't worried about, like, some people would say, like, you're letting people take advantage of you, or you're letting people do things that doesn't seem right, it doesn't seem fair, or you're you're giving them too much leeway or giving them too much grace. And I'm just like, but is that even possible? Like, because if I give people grace, like, I know God's going to give me grace and other people are giving me grace. If I forgive people, then I know other people are going to forgive me and God's going to forgive me. I am so conscious now about sowing and reaping that I really want to make sure that I'm doing that in a really, really beautiful, positive way in people's lives. And I want to encourage all of you that is listening to this podcast to make sure that you are doing the same thing in your life and your business, that when you have an opportunity to forgive, and by the way, forgiveness means accepting what happened, doesn't mean condoning the behavior, saying was okay. And you can set boundaries to make sure that person can't do that thing to you or hurt you or do that again. I want to be clear about that. But when you give forgiveness, when you give grace, when you give your team second chances, when you choose to think the best about people, even when they do something that's hurtful or is like an action that's not good, like when you choose to do that over and over again, you're also going to sow all of that, and that's all going to come back to you, which is so amazing and so beautiful and so incredible. And so I just want you all to be aware of this. I just want you all to be aware of this, because when you give love, you receive love. You give forgiveness, you receive forgiveness. You give grace, you receive grace. And when you help people, other people will help you. When you choose to help people in little ways in their business, people will help you in little ways in your business. And I just would love for everybody listening today to like deliberately today make a concerted effort to do some really good sowing in other people's lives knowing, believing, and trusting that it's going to come back to you. And I guess that's why I do a lot of free content, like my podcast, my YouTube, which I bring to this. Subscribe in all the places. Tell all the people. Like, if you get encouragement from this podcast, leave a great podcast review. Share it on Spotify. Share it on iTunes. Share it in all the places. Same thing with YouTube. Subscribe. Please, I cannot do this on my own. I just want so many people to know how loved they adore, to be certain and their capabilities and abilities, who God created them to be, that nothing is impossible for them. All the things I say all the long day, I can't do without your help. I can't. I can do a lot of things, but I can't do it on my help. I certainly can't do it without God. And I'd love for you guys to share that. I love you so much. Next week's podcast episode is going to be about how to maintain forward momentum. I had to look at my little sheet of paper. How to maintain forward momentum. This is going to be so good. I love you all so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.